Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. You amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. I'm having hat-free day. Mind you, does that look like it's a mess? That's better. I'm no longer naked. Anyway, you're looking absolutely fantabulous for this fantabulous Friday. So let's get straight into some meat and potatoes. As we have, over the last few hours, we have seen quite a lot happening in the Idaho 4 case in terms of the court battle that is between Ann Taylor and Bill Thompson. The one side that is looking to execute and the other side that is looking to stop an execution. And look, the one thing that I think has been made absolutely transparent over the last couple of days especially is that people have their own thoughts about this case, and much to my upset is that a lot of the people who are following this case have made their mind up from very early on, and some things that had been said, some things that had been attached to Bryan Kohberger, and they had simply been, they're like a Velcro monkey. You've heard me use that term. These things that just get stuck on you and they just affect you. You have to try and pull them off and get rid of them, but some things you just cannot. And that's what's happened with this Idaho 4 situation, where a lot of the stuff that has been pushed out by the media has become these Velcro monkeys. And yeah, Bryan Kohberger is covered in Velcro monkeys. And look, this is what I want people to step back and consider, right? Is that there are other things around this crime that are potentials. That absolutely are potentials. One such thing is that there was a fight earlier on in the evening, a fight that was so bad that Xana's parents were going to drive and make sure that she was okay. So that's a red flag to me. That is a huge red flag. And what I'm trying to do here is say that at this point in time, every single person is, in the eyes of the law, innocent of any wrongdoing. There has to be a process, and that process has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person who is being accused is in fact guilty of that crime. And not even Bryan Kohberger, regardless of how anyone feels, has been through that process yet. He is the person who law enforcement have looked at some details and they have decided, based on what they've seen, that they believe he's the person who done it. But there are things missing here. There is seemingly a lack of connection. No connection between the client and the victims. And there are fundamentals that people look for in terms of these crimes. Now, don't get me wrong, these crimes can happen without them, but in general, you would expect them to be there. We talk about means, motive, and opportunity. Now, Bryan Kohberger is a book smart, if you like. He's a book smart, and could he be a book smart with a deep, dark secret? He certainly could. But does he? We don't know. And I think that's what a lot of people fail to understand. You don't know. Unless you were there, unless you are an eyewitness to that crime, you don't know what happened. You can only ingest what is out in the public and make a decision based on that. And if you are an open-minded person, then you will appreciate that you've not seen everything, you've not heard everything, so at this stage you can't really make an opinion. And with that lack of finality, you should, in theory, be open to the fact that there could be a different story. Now, I believe that just as much as I can turn around and say I appreciate that Bryan Kohberger could be the person who did it, because of my positioning within how I look at this crime, I can also turn around and say that I equally believe that the fight that broke out could have led to something much, much worse. Could have led to something much, much worse. And what I mean by that is that we know that there was accusations of this fight perpetuating over jealousy, anger, angst, and people who had been taking steroids, for instance. And I have had personal situations myself dealing with someone who was taking these things and I had to stop them from doing a crime that could have very well spiraled into what we're talking about today very, very easily. So I know and have first-hand experience of how quickly things can escalate and spiral out of control when the antagonist of that story is someone who cannot be controlled. But look, we also know that this Greek system has a fundamental basis upon protecting themselves, protecting each other, shutting up, shutting the world out, and keeping everyone back. Get back, Shadrach. And do you know what I mean? It's these things that I feel are not being considered whatsoever. So I don't think it's too beyond the realms of possibility to say that this was a fight. It did spiral out of control. In fact, Ethan Chapin could have been the target. He could have been the target in this, and the rest of the people in that house would simply collateral damage. Kaylee Gonsalves, by her own family's admission, stated that she was a ferocious friend. She would try to protect her friends, and look at the injuries that we're told that she sustained. We have 2 surviving roommates who have left the area, never to return. They want to wash their hands of it, step back and get away, and we have a system that is seemingly shut down any forms of communication. Now, that doesn't sound like a system that is hell-bent on getting the person who did this, getting involved, getting their hands dirty, saying, I was here, they were my friends, and I want to watch this person pay because I believe he did it. It's almost like we've got away with this. We're going to step back and let the system now deal with it and fade into the darkness. But how many things do you want to take into consideration that happened around this crime and the things that were said and the things that we have seen and disregard them because it helps protect your thought process over what you think in terms of Bryan Kohberger? And again, I say this with reserve because, again, I state that I am completely aware that Bryan Kohberger could just be this outsider. I struggle with it, however, when he has no prior history of anything of the sort, and seemingly he has gone through periods of struggle in his life that hasn't exacerbated into anything close to looking like this. And if he had these inclinations or prerequisites, then wouldn't he have perhaps fallen down that route much earlier on in his life? What was the catalyst? What was the trigger here? Why did it happen on this specific night? Even those small details matter. Because on a night when Idaho are playing Davis University at football, and this should have been an abundance of drinking and partying and what you would normally have seen at this house, it just didn't happen. It was an anomaly for that house on a Saturday night to be quiet. They had parties. They had people there all the time, to the point where I've said this countless times. Sometimes the people who lived there weren't even there, and it was just filled with people who didn't live there, but were still partying. So why did this happen on this night? And if you're saying Bryan Kohberger done it, and he did it without no help, no support, nobody calling him and saying the coast is clear, are we saying that he literally made the decision to do this on a Saturday night, what could have seen him walking into what could have been a complete and utter ambush? You tell me. But I will say this. This crime has already taken the lives of 4 people. And that's a tragedy. But adding another one to the body count does not balance the scales if that person is not the right person. It's not just a case of sacrificing someone to balance the scale. You have to find who did it, and you have to know beyond a reasonable doubt. And we already know now that certain things that have led people, because I've spoken to them in the community, the very things that were the catalyst for people's disbelief and contempt and hatred for Bryan Kohberger have been now said to be untrue, false statements. So Bryan Kohberger weren't stalking these victims. He weren't stalking them. We have a car that has not yet been confirmed as being his, that was earlier on stated by an apparent professional in their field, they didn't say the car was his. They wrongly aged it. And could it have just been wrongly aged? Of course it could. The aesthetics between them isn't massively, there's not really anything you can perhaps make out on those style footages that they got. But ultimately, we haven't seen anything other than they think it's his, and Taylor saying that she thinks it isn't. So the only thing that matters here is bias. That is the only thing that matters in this case, is bias. Because in the evidence, in the absence, of absolute fact and proof, all they have is circumstantial evidence, and circumstantial evidence is built around what they can convince people on. And another word for convince is make bias. Can we utilize what we have to create enough bias to get the result we want? Let me know down below. Where do you sit? And whatever side of the fence you're on, what pushed you there? And let's see how many people have been made bias off of information that hasn't yet been proven to be absolute fact. And I'll catch you all in the next one.